Okay, everyone, 10 o'clock. Thanks for showing up. We hope we get a few more people, make room for them. I'm sorry you're in the sun and we're in the shade, but these are the heroes, so we want to keep them cool today. My name's Joe Walton. I'm on the Homebuilt Aircraft Council here, and also a proud member of Chapter 302 in Conroe, Texas. But it's not about me, it's about the Thorp T18 today. And David Reed and Lee Walton. David's airplane is on my right, your left, and Lee's airplane is on your right. So we're going to be talking about the Thorp T18. I'm going to have a little trouble with the microphone. No, it works. There's an optimum position here. What I wanted to mention was that the T18, a lot of you probably know about. In fact, how many out there are either own one now or are building a T18? Okay, these guys paid you to show up, I guess, right? All right. We also want to get the crowd that might be interested in building one. We're going to tell you why a T18 would be a very viable project today, even though we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the T18 being deployed. I guess it showed up here at Oshkosh first in '63 at that was Rockford Air Show. Okay. So 60 years ago, and I'll just give you a little bit of insight into the T18 and let these guys take it from there. But it's not a coincidence that it's called a T18. T standing for John Thorp, the designer. 18 means it's his his 18th design. So his first design that he won, 1931. So Thorp was involved in aviation for a long time. His last design that I figured out, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, was a T-28 in 1974. So his design, okay, good, I got you. It's on Wikipedia. But there's a lot of variants of the T-18, and that's what we're here to talk about. It's an all-metal aircraft. There's other all-metal aircraft out here today. It can be built in either a plans-built configuration, or there are kits available for it too. So there's some nice options there, whether it depends. And yeah, do you have more time on your hands or more money on your hands? So, pardon me. Let me get started with your. Can you tell us, well, before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about John Thorp? Would it be better for Lee to do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Give us the background on John, the designer, and then why he decided to build design the T-18.
So John Thorp's, let me go ahead and just start with the T-18. I'm not really good on his family history. I might fumble that up, and my friends out here, they'll correct me too much. Let me start with the T-18. So I love telling this story. So in 1962, EAA had a contest. The inspiration of the contest was kind of give homebuilders more options for things to build. There just was it was limited to a select few. So they held a contest, and there were a few requirements. A number of them were it had to be trailable, easy to build with common tools, and relatively easy to fly. So the winner of that contest was the Bowers Flybaby, and I'm kind of reaching here, but I'm going to go and give you what I thought John Thorp's piece and what was going through his head. He looked at that and said, okay, the medium of the day is tube and fabric, wood tube and fabric. And someone wants to build a wood tube and fabric airplane. They go order their raw materials, and a whole pile of tubing and a whole pile of wood and all this other stuff shows up in their garage. And John Thorp, being a metal airplane designer, he said, I can design a metal airplane that's simpler than that. They can build quicker. It'll hold two people, and we'll get to the speed thing later. So he submitted an article to EAA and said, "Hey, congratulations on the design." And now that may be incorrect, but he said, "Here's what I would have entered." And he went through a design of a T-18. He described how it could be built from 12 sheets of aluminum with common tools put together with pop rivets, and sketched a little drawing of a T-18. I think he had a three drawing. He'd already been thinking about this. And everybody said, yes, let's do it. So from then on, he started writing drawings, and people reading Sport Aviation were saying, give me more, give me more. And he was so busy producing drawings that he didn't even build the prototype by a guy by the name of Bill Warwick, thank you. Bill Warwick was the first to fly, and he, of course, the original design for Thorp was an open cockpit, open cylinder, putt around the field thing. Well, Bill Warwick kind of took the hint from John Thorp and said, hey, you can build something that looks more like this and go 200 miles an hour. So this is 1963. Bill Warwick shows up at Rockford, and that's how the T-18 really took off. As people saw that and said, whoa, that's a 200-mile-an-hour airplane I could build in a year and a half.
So I don't think anybody nowadays would look at this and envision it as an open cockpit airplane. But that, did it, for open cockpit?
Maybe a half a dozen that's quickly converted it to a bubble canopy after that.
And the original engine design was that 0290 GPU engine that was available back then?
Yeah, so the 0290G was very popular in the 60s because they were readily available, very cheap. And a lot of the designs in that design contest were designed around that motor. So I think that's why he kind of jumped on that. But it was a very popular motor at the time.
So we've come a long way since then. We'll talk about the variants, how many different engines, and so on. So that's the genesis of how it was designed. Tell us a little bit more about that. You mentioned to me earlier their simplicity. So 12 sheets of aluminum. There's some unique characteristics that you can see right on the airplane now. The canted wing. If you look back on the back end, the horizontal is not a horizontal stabilizer, it's a stabilator. So a fully moving stabilator. I noticed the cowling is a little bit different. So speak to those unique features.
Yeah, so the cowlings have gone through many iterations, but back to the easy to build or semi-easy to build features. Going back to the planes at the time, not only would you get a pile of raw materials, you'd have to build jigs. And the jigs would be, that's a considerable amount of time. You've got to build a jig to put together a steel tube fuselage. You've got to build jigs to make your wing ribs. So there's upfront work there. With this airplane, the idea was you're building form blocks, but it's a constant chord wing, so you've got a front rib and a rear rib. You've got a series of form blocks for fuselage, but you're not using any jigs. The fuselage is built on a flat surface. So that your jig for the fuselage is a absolutely flat surface. Same with the wing. The wings are the unusual wing design is because a piece of aluminum, a roll of aluminum, comes in a 4-foot width. So this is a way to put a wing together without having any lap joints.
Excellent.
4x8, thank you. Yeah. Either way,
so 4x8, and so foot circumference basically, and then foot wide on each section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Now that also gives you the opportunity to be able to.
So there is a folding wing design. This is not one of them. The original intent, part of that design competition, was that the airplane had to be trailable within, I think, 30 minutes. So the original T-18 design did not have any flaps, and that meant you could remove 5 bolts and drop the wing, put it on a trailer, and then roll the fuselage up over it, and you were good to take it home. That's not really the case here, but that still was a feature that people desired. So Lou Sunderland, who was another pioneer in the T-18 world that later took on and designed rebranded the T-18 the S-18, he designed a convertible wing that was able to be folded and made the plane trailable without having to drop the wing.
Are there some tricycle gear versions of this?
They are, but I'd rather not talk about it.
You don't? Do you let them see your website, or?
Yeah, there are some tricycle gears out there. I know of at least 2 that have been converted back to tail draggers.
Yeah.
It's not. It's for me. It's aesthetics, but I'm not sure. We want to promote that, to be honest with you, because I don't think it was a well-designed setup. Yeah.
Let's go to David here for a second. I want to find out why you decided to build a T-18.
Well, actually, my flight instructor, Roy Ferris, was building one whenever I started taking lessons in about 2000. And he told me that I was going to build one before I knew I was going to build one. I'm like, no, I could never commit to a project of that size. And, he had one sitting there 50% probably. But, when you look at it, it's like, well, I could make that piece, and I can make that piece. Well, you only make one piece at a time. And so, before I knew it, I was starting into it. We found the form blocks. Lee talked about the form blocks. Like the wing rib, for example, you have to bend a flange on the rib that's in a curve. You can't do that in a break or anything. You have to take a piece of plywood, or some kind of wood and form it in exactly the shape that you need, and then a second sheet, and you sandwich the two sheets or the aluminum between the two sheets of wood, and then you take a little rubber hammer and start forming it down over that. It's a relatively simple process, but it takes as long to make the form block as it does to form the sheet. Well, there was a gentleman that had built a T18 in Milwaukee that had the form blocks, and I think it was something like $100, come pick them up. And so wife and I made a weekend run up and picked up the form blocks, and I started hammering out pieces, and 5 years later, I had an airplane.
That's actually a very quick time for a plans-built aircraft.
I had about 2,700 hours in it, which is about, people say, oh my gosh, but that's 500 hours a year. That's about 10 hours a week. That's 3 or 4 hours on the weekend and a couple hours 2 or 3 nights a week.
Sure.
I mean, the spouse has to be in favor, but I mean, it's something that, anyone can do it. I was a first-time builder, and I mean, I'm handy with my hands. But, you mentioned the time for money thing. I didn't have a lot of either one at the time. The first flight was in '07, so we're talking just after 2000. I decided I had more time than I had money, and so I made every piece that I could, pretty much. So I would say I probably made 98% of the pieces of that airplane from raw materials.
Excellent.
So that shows that it can be done.
It can be, and that's a very good point that you brought up. It's one that EAA tries to push, is that, they're complex machines, but you do one piece at a time, and it makes it very doable by somebody that hasn't done it before. Excellent. We're going to get back to your airplane in a minute. So 7 years, that was your reason, because you got introduced to it early. Lee, how about yourself? Why did you get into the T-18?
I was kind of born into it. I was raised up right north here in Neenah, Wisconsin. My dad was building a T-18 in the basement, and we would come to Oshkosh every year, and I just grew up with the group. And a lot of my friends here I've known since I was a toddler. So that's been kind of my family since I was a little kid. And I've flown a lot of airplanes, and I keep coming back to T-18 because it's just one of the nicest flying airplanes there is. I mean, there's so many things you could say about the T-18, but its flying quality is one of those things people do not mention. It's just very well designed by a true aeronautical engineer, and it shows.
So we'll get into that in a second. So your dad built how many? 1, 2?
I'd say my dad, we built 1.5. It was the original iteration, a folding wet wing. The airplane was damaged in a tornado, so much like Dave's airplane, we rebuilt it again together. So 1.5, and I've done a few on my own. This is the only one that has my name on it, but I've rebuilt several.
Okay, so this one, what length of time was involved in building this one?
This was this was a started project when it came into my hands. It was I'd say I probably used about 10% of that project. And I'm trying to think. I started in 2011. It first flew in 2014, so it's going about 3.5 years.
Excellent. That's really fast for plans built.
It helps this plane. The project, which actually we're talking about plans. I can show you on 2 hands the parts that Dave did not make on this airplane. This was a kit that somebody had bought from a guy back in the 70s named Ken Knowles that promoted the T-18. So a lot of the parts were already there. I didn't have to, it was more of a director's set when I received it.
So I would imagine as a plans built, obviously you can build it any way you want to. You mentioned to me earlier, though, there's a kit available these days if someone chose to go that direction. What model is that kit, and where do you get one of those?
That model is called the S-18, which is the wide-body version of this airplane, which has the convertible wing, so the latest iteration of the design. And that kit is available from a company called Thorp Central out of Las Vegas. And I just spoke with Jim this morning. The price for that kit, which just was shocking to me, which includes all the fiberglass, the canopy, landing gear, roll bar, this is a pre-punched kit, is $20,250, so $22,500, which I think is dirt cheap.
So, if you choose plans built because of economy, you can still do kit built as a very economical.
I don't think there's a kit out there. Even the Panther, I think, is more than that, and that's a single seat Corvair airplane.
Yeah.
And it still shocks me.
So, okay, great. We'll get back to maybe the contents of the kit or plans built, what the materials are you got to buy. David, let's get back to you for a second. So, Lee's patting your back saying you made every part on this thing. Tell us about some of your design choices. What engines am I going to put in it? Because you've got a lot of new things on there too.
Well, first of all, I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to be
good.
And I don't want to be a test pilot. So you don't deviate on anything that's structural. In the plans and so on, nothing structural. You leave that alone. If you want to show your individuality, do that on the trim pieces and some of that sort of thing. These planes, you see everything from the 0290, which is 125, 130 horse, up to the 0360, which is 180 to a little more than that horsepower. I chose the 0320, partly because it's common, partly because mine's 160 horse, and I can burn car gas at home. So I burn MoGas, 91 octane car gas, whenever I'm at home. Time I'm on the road, of course, then I run 100 low lead. I've just got a carbureted engine because that was simpler, the wood prop because it's cheaper and lighter.
You told me you built the prop yourself, carved it.
As it happened, in the last year I wanted to try that. I wasn't quite happy with the pitch of the prop that I had, and so that's somewhat a copy of an Amar Demuth. I first had to make a router duplicator, and then the one that I had wasn't quite the pitch that I wanted, so I modified a little bit. Yes, I built a prop myself, and that's got 2 layers of fiberglass over the top of it, so somewhat waterproof. And then, of course, if you're going to do the prop, then you have to make your own spinner and backplate.
I want to hear about how you do a spinner like that looks that good.
Well, I pulled a mold off of another spinner.
There you go.
I'm one of these guys out here told me there's no points for originality. I'm a pretty good thief. I try to give credit to everybody else, but it's the thing about we've got an excellent builders group, support group, and there's lots of ideas out there on the flight line. And as you're going through the process of building, why we all look around at what everybody else has. And I like that feature of this airplane. I like that feature of that airplane. I stole a whole bunch of ideas, and there's several of my own. But that's one of the nice things about the experimental is that you can do what you want.
Well, that just talks to the community that EA has provided for all of us. That there's somebody out there that might have an idea for you or some help. It always surprises me when I find somebody that's built an airplane all by themselves without asking anybody for help, and you go, wait a minute, why did you pass up this great opportunity? Since we got into that, David, Lee, I think you kind of do the social part of this?
I don't.
Do you have a website? Or
we do have a website, and I can't take credit for a social media side. That's handled by a guy named Terry Hagel, but there is a Facebook group out there that he handles. I do the website and their forum site, which is kind of our go-to help.
If I wanted to find it, what's your address?
It's T18.net.
.net, okay.
And you can find a link to the forum from there.
That's pretty easy. So, do you know how many active builders are out there right now since you're running that site?
Active builders right now, I think I'd probably throw the number of 30 out there.
Okay, that's all right.
I would say that Dave has done a really good job of recruiting people in his neck of the woods. If you were to look at the hub of interest,
there we go,
in southeastern Illinois, that would be the epicenter of T18 interest right now. It used to be California at one time. Now it seems to be going from the Midwest. So hats off to Dave for that. I
believe you told me earlier about 500 of these aircraft have flown at one time or another.
I would say more than 500 have thrown. I think, if I were to sift through the FAA registry, I can probably find close to 400 here in the U.S. And then they're very popular in Australia. We've got some representatives here from New Zealand as well, and we also have several in Canada. So it's a popular, it's international airplane as well.
So it seems like for international, it's probably a lot easier when you're shipping just raw materials rather than parts. Maybe a little bit less costly to do that. I don't know.
As far as building goes?
No, as far as just shipping the parts rather than a huge box of completed parts. Just getting the raw materials might be a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it probably lends itself to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, David, we didn't finish talking about some unique things. You said you did some unique stuff. Carving your own props, a big deal. Tell us about some of those features that maybe somebody might go, hey, I'd like to do that.
My friend Derek and I mean, starting at the front end there, my friend Derek and I were both ready for new cowlings here about 2 years ago, I guess. And so we decided rather than pay the shipping, like you said, to get the cowlings here, why we made our own molds, modified an existing mold, but tightened it up a little bit, made our own molds, made our own cowlings. Mine's fiberglass. Derek's happens to be out of carbon fiber. So while I was at it, I also made molds and made my own wheel pants, which are a little bit larger, but I wanted them to where they could be square on both sides and not have the bump out for the brake caliper like most cowlings have. So I just was kind of looking for that design. The standard fuel tank is 29 gallon, mine is 40. With the modern avionics, they're not as deep, so that leaves a little more room up there where it's a header tank in front of the instrument panel. And I'm extremely pleased with that design. It's a gravity feed system. Right. You put gas in one hole, it runs out of one hole. Fuel management's kind of a no-brainer.
So I believe that was probably one of John's ideas to, most low-wing airplanes are, obviously they can't be gravity feed. You have to have a pump. But by doing it with a header tank, now you can get an engine that doesn't need a engine-driven fuel pump.
Yeah, as long as you got a carburetor, right.
Yep.
Let's see. Fuel tank. Then I've got some extra storage compartments. My wife and I, we don't cook, but we have a tent, sleeping bags, air beds, all that stuff. So there's storage space under the seat. I've modified my seat bottoms and backs a little bit so that there's a little extra storage there. The baggage compartment is actually in the first bay, about 2 foot there behind the seats. I've also got a small compartment in the turtle deck back there, which is where I keep my ELT and a couple things.
I think there was a good point you made about not modifying the structure, but there's lots of room for things like that. Can you go get your bomb device and tell us? Yeah. Give the microphone to Lee, because we're going to talk about performance. Bring it up here and make them think about what is this thing. In the meantime, people want to know how does this airplane perform? So Lee, can you talk to that? They always want to know how fast, how slow, landing. Just give us some performance ideas.
So it definitely depends on how many cubic inches you have. But I can speak to, I actually fly another airplane that's powered by No 360, so I can speak to both of them. But first I'll talk to Dave and I. We both fly together quite a bit. We have the same engine, same horsepower, different props. But in the end, they're both about a 200 mile an hour top and about 170 to 180 mile an hour cruise, depending on how hard we push it. I climb better than Dave with the constant speed, but once we level off and we're in cruise, we're both neck and neck. And we have tried line abreast and tried to outrun each other, and you can sit there all day, it doesn't do anything. So 200 top, 175 to 180 cruise.
Let's go to the low end, which talks to my landing and takeoff performance.
So we're both very lucky, and this might open up a whole new can of worms. We both have what's called the LDS. What's that? LDS2, thank you. LDS2 leading edge, which changes the leading edge of the wing to a more forgiving, lower speed wing. The original Thorp wing had a laminar flow airfoil, and it tended to be not very forgiving on the low end. It was kind of you're flying or you're not. Both these airplanes have the LDS2, the newer airfoil, which allow it to they shave about 10 mile an hour off the lower end. So as a result, if the original T18 stalled around 65, we're seeing 55.
Are you talking miles an hour?
Miles an hour, okay. Yeah. This wing actually has a unique feature on my airplane. There's a leading edge strake that was intended, the way I understand it, to make it go faster. I'm not seeing that, but I guarantee it makes it go a lot slower. Okay. So I might be 5 mile an hour lower than Dave on that. And as my wife knows, I struggle with that because I still haven't learned how to land it. But it's a work in progress.
So you both have flaps, and you mentioned that the original design didn't have flaps to facilitate the wing removal. Much difference in the flaps? Is it any extra lift or mostly drag? How's that work?
Yeah, I think what shaves about 5 mile an hour off the stall speed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? I know you're down at a big airport, but what's a small airport operation? Tell me if you want to take it to a grass strip or.
Yeah, it's not really a rough field airplane. I land on grass strips somewhat routinely, but it's there's no suspension. It's a tempered steel landing gear, and the only suspension you've got is really the air in the tires.
Okay.
So it's not a rough field airplane, but we go into grass strips routinely, and 505 tires. They're not very big, so it doesn't like bumps. But it's a robust construction.
So 2,000-foot runway is not going to scare you off.
No, 2,000 is comfortable.
Yeah.
There's a strip that's 1,600 foot that we fly into once in a while for a fly-in.
Yeah, good.
And you don't want to burn up any runway, but 2,000 you don't have to just pay attention, and it's not a problem at all.
Yeah, so that opens up a lot of airports for you.
Yes, it does.
Okay, maybe it's time to figure out the big reveal.
Yeah, so I just brought this along. That I made this year. We were asked to help Fred spread a friend's ashes at his strip, and of course I wasn't. They asked if a couple others of us would fly along and formation and make a few passes and so on. So I wasn't directly spreading the ashes, but the gentleman that did had a little bit of the usual problem that when you spread ashes, it's hard. Some of it wants to come back with you. We'll just leave it at that. And so I was looking for a better way to get the ashes out of the slipstream. Being said, also the T-18, you cannot have the canopy open in flight. It will, the wind pressure coming up over, blowing it back forward. You cannot open it, and it wouldn't be stable if you didn't. So there's not a way to spread ashes out of the Thorp. So basically, this is just a piece of 4-inch PVC pipe. And I've got a linear actuator mounted inside of here to a linkage so that whenever and I've got two, one for either side, because if you build one, you have to have two. I've got just two little switches that I mount right up under the instrument panel on two screws, runs off of ship's power, and then whenever you flip the switch, the little linear actuator, just about as fast as what I turned it, just about that fast, it'll go from open to closed. There's a tube that goes down through, and the actuator's mounted right here. But at that point, it just becomes a straight through tube, and the wind blows the ashes out. And I mount this down. I take the gap cover off at the brake in the wing, the dihedral brake, so it's outside of the stabilator. It's below the wing. It's away from all the control surfaces. It doesn't affect the flight characteristics. And then we also. For another acquaintance, why we did a gender reveal. So I've got a picture that the photographer took of that. So we can take care of you before you're. I hope everybody has a sense of humor. We can take care of you before you're born. We can do your gender reveal, and then after you die, we can spread your ashes. And so I was talking to one of my friends. That's what the C2G on there. We've got you covered from cradle to grave.
So for the gender reveal, what material did you put in there?
They had some pink powder that was, I think it was a cake icing decoration dye that was super fine. I mean, it was a powder, but it would run out just almost like water. And I got a surprise. We practiced with sawdust and a few things, and the sawdust more or less just explodes out of there. And so I expected that very fine powder to do the same thing, but apparently it was probably a 20-minute flight up to where we did it. And apparently it compacted in there somewhat, because when we flipped it on, it probably took 30 seconds for it to all come out. I'm assuming that it just layer, taking it off of there. But it did look kind of like two smoke bombs coming out of the back of the airplane. It just lasted longer than we expected, but the people were thrilled.
So it was a girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always yes, it was a girl. It's always an adventure.
I've got a friend that did that for a couple. The husband hired him, and they didn't even know what the gender was. The family, they had the results of the test sent to this guy, and then he bought the color. And when the gender reveal was the first time they knew it, he said that was a little creepy, knowing what she was carrying, and she didn't know it. So, well, anyway, that's an interesting thing. It looks cool too.
I was sure we were going to be asked to do it some more. Yeah, so it just mounts with 3 bolts, 2 bolts here, 1 bolt there. You take the gap cover off. You can have it on there in 30 minutes.
Did you rename it the F-18 then when there, you know?
We should do that, I
Yeah, I
guess.
think so, yeah. That would be your variant, the F-18. So that's cool. That's a neat little adaptation that it really speaks to what the home built world's all about, is that you can customize things and do anything you want, but I thought Dave's advice was right on, that when you've got a design that already exists, that's been working for 60 years, yeah, don't mess with that basic part, because as I've heard before, and you mentioned you're not an engineer, the designers like that because the engineers are always trying to make it better. We'll let the sound of freedom go by here. Is that the tri-motor? I think so, yeah. So we talked about the performance. I understand, Dave, you're an everyday kind of flyer. Lee says he's a go-on-trips kind of flyer. Let's talk about the type of flying that you can do with this airplane. Dave, go ahead.
Well, I like to fly at least a couple times a week, just because I love to fly as much as anything. My wife, she enjoys flying just for the sake of flying from time to time, but she really likes the trip-taking part of things as well, too.
Yeah.
We go to a lot of flying breakfasts. That's just an excuse to go somewhere, you know. I've flown I checked before I came up here, I've flown 171 young eagles in that airplane.
Excellent.
So one at a time.
Yeah.
But you know, I just fly for enjoyment. People often ask, can you do aerobatics? You can do gentleman aerobatics. I can't do anything negative. If I turn upside down, you know, the fuel system the engine's going to die. But you can do a loop, you can do a roll, and I do those somewhat routinely.
So John designed the airplane to be aerobatic category for the G
I
limits.
believe it's 6 positive, 4 negative. Is that right?
That's standard aerobatic.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. What was I going to ask you on that? So, yeah, we talked about it can be an everyday flyer or a long distance flyer. So, what kind of range? You said you got an extra large tank.
Yeah, it's a 40-gallon tank. I flight plan at 160 miles an hour and 8 gallons an hour, but I'll do better than that. But that's kind of how I flight plan. So
nice round numbers. It's easy to do the math.
And in a 2.5 hour leg, say a 2.5 hour leg is about 400 miles. So
okay.
That's a pretty good hop. I don't routinely fly. I mean, for 40 gallons, that's 5 hours of fuel. I don't have a 5-hour bladder.
Yeah.
But it's nice occasionally to have the range if you're trying to make a run around some weather or something and try to get a little bit ahead. Like I said, I burn the cheaper fuel at home, so when I left for Oshkosh, I had 40 gallons on. You know, after that, and I don't fill it up the majority of the time because you don't need the extra weight. Why carry weight around you don't need?
So you got one tank, right?
One tank.
Can you hand the mic to Lee? I believe no. So Lee, you do a little bit longer distance flying, maybe, or maybe more distant or more travel rather than local. But you got a different fuel arrangement. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so our mission statements are a little different. I think I do love to fly, but Dave's more of a he's more of a he's the daily flyer. So yes, yeah, we have roughly the same fuel capacity. However, I carry mine in the combination of the wings and the header tank. When Jamie and I go fly, we typically, for example, the way home on Saturday, we'll load up here, stop once, and make it to Houston. So that's kind of our, how we're on a mission. We're trying to get somewhere. I also, our planes are equipped a little differently. Like I said, Dave's more of a daily flyer. I'm more of a, I wanted, as I mentioned, I used to fly corporate and charter. I wanted an aircraft that felt like that, where I could punch through a 500-foot cloud deck, get on top, and be comfortable, and fly and approach and feel comfortable. They're configured a little differently, but same rough range. So
you got yours configured as an IFR aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since you've got fuel in your wings, and Dave doesn't, that means you need a fuel pump set up, I guess.
It's injected anyhow, so
okay.
You're right. There's different ways to do that, even if it was carbureted. There's two schools of thought on that. Some people pump their fuel into the header tank. Some people, if they did not have, if they were carbureted, they would have to have a fuel pump and suck it from the wings. So I'm envious of Dave's situation because it's just fuel management's zero, whereas I do have to be wary of where I'm at, at any point in time.
Sure.
So.
and you've got to fill it up in 3 different places. He gets to fill it up in one
He's
place.
definitely got the better setup.
Yeah. You guys have any extra points before we open up to the audience for well, I'll tell you what, is there any more on the, oh, I know what we haven't covered. We mentioned early on that you can get it as a kit. You already covered that a little bit. You mentioned that basically get everything other than the engine and avionics. Similar to another airplane that there's a lot of them parked over here that offers kits, but the price was so good. So how do they break that kit up into sections, or is it everything at one time, or how's that show up?
You can buy it all at once, or you can buy it as a wing kit, an empennage kit, rudder kit, vertical stabilizer kit, a fuselage kit. Or I think the landing gear is even included as a separate kit, even though that's more of an assembly than anything else. The new landing gear comes in 3 pieces, where the original landing gear was a single piece. So that's a few minutes.
So that can preach to the economic side of it, that if you can do it little pieces at a time, because as Dave pointed out, you can only build one part at a time anyway, so don't overburden yourself with anything extra. If I'm going to plans built it now, do I have to source all the materials myself, or is there somebody that can ship me all the material that I need?
We have, I've tried to contact aircraft spruce. The quick answer is no, you've got to source it yourself. But I've tried to contact aircraft spruce. They have several materials kits for numerous plans-built aircraft that's still in their catalog, and I don't see any reason why they couldn't do it for the Thorp.
So they don't do that yet. So where do I buy a set of plans if I want to be a plans-built guy?
You can buy a set of plans for the S-18 from Thorp Central. They will sell you a set of plans. The other side of things is there have been many T-18s that have been started, not finished.
Sure.
Obviously, if a T-18 is built with a set of plans, that set of plans lives with that airplane for the rest of its life. It's unusable to build with. It's become void.
I see.
But there were several thousands of plans sold out there that are drifting around. A lot of people like myself, I'm sure Dave, I've got 3 extra sets of plans. So if somebody really wanted a set of T-18 plans, they could contact any of us on the forum. That we probably have a couple hundred sets of plans laying around that people aren't using.
And that plan starts off with a list of materials that you need, so you can just start ordering things, or do you have to kind of?
We've had to put that together ourselves. We have put that together, but and then that's actually on. You can go to the. It's kind of cheating. You could go to the Thorp Central website and extrapolate what's in the kit.
Oh, okay.
Say I'm going to order all that hardware and some metal.
So who runs that? Thorp Central.
It's a guy named Jim Grahn, he calls that as Cubes. Another Air Force guy, flies for Southwest.
Okay. Yeah. And he's located at where?
In Las Vegas.
In Vegas, okay.
And his website is thorpcentral.com.
Thorpcentral.com. Great. All right. Did we miss any other high points before we go to questions?
I don't think so.
Well, let's advertise first that I don't want to take all your thunder. You're going to be doing a presentation in the Homebuilt hangar at what time?
We have a forum at 11:30 in the Homebuilts hangar, which is straight back. I'm looking at the front sign of it right now.
And you don't have to sit in the sun over there, so.
Yeah, that'll be little more. That's more of a kind of Q&A with actual Thorp owners and builders. So it'll be more in depth. If anybody's interested in just hearing how the group interacts, and if you have any more really detailed questions you might not want to ask at a forum like this, please come by and just sit back and enjoy. It's usually always a good time.
Okay, well, let's open this one up to a little Q&A for either Lee or Dave. If you think it's specific, just point out. So let's start right here in the front. Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
No, they're both there. They're both there.
And the white one is what model is that? The CW?
So I'll go through it real quick because it gets confusing. So the T18 started off as a T18, and then as I told you, there was a desire for a fold-in wing. That became the T18C.
C meaning convertible.
And then later on,
converted to a non-wing airplane. Okay.
And later on, somebody said, "Well, if Loose Hunter can design a convertible wing, surely you can make it wider." So he went back and worked with John Thorp and said, "Can I make it 2 inches wider?" And he said, "Sure, but you have to make it 5 inches longer." So to conserve the perfect, that perfect shape of the airplane. So that's the T18W, which would be the T18 wide.
So not only wider, it's longer too. Okay.
Yes. If you wanted to make a wide body that was convertible wing, this is where it gets confusing, you'd have a T18CW. So
there you go.
To simplify things, when John Thorp retired from the plans market, and I'll speak to that in a second, so it's a good thing to point out, Lou Sunderland said, hey, I'll take it over, but I'm going to rebrand it as the S18, because John Thorp did not want to be, didn't want to be involved, but he was trying to remove himself from that responsibility. He was ill and didn't have the energy for it. The one thing I will point out is the T18's always had support from its designer, but it's never had a manufacturer or marketing or any official, one person to go to. It's always been a team effort. It started off early on in the T18 newsletters, and now it's the T18 Mutual Aid Society, which is the website you're speaking of. It's survived this long just as a team effort. And we were talking about in the 70s where this whole flight line was flooded with T18s. It's only until the Very Easy and the RV series came out, and later the Glacier and things like that, Landseer, that people's attention was drawn elsewhere. But that was all done through community. That wasn't done by a marketing effort or anything else. It was just people and EAA.
How many aircraft do you have here today?
Today,
or this week, I should say.
think we have 20 right now. We were expecting 25, and 3 unfortunately had to turn around and go back to.
So there's a great representative example of the airplanes. Most of them are parked, I believe you said, right?
Row 377.
Am I pointing the right way? 377.
We've got a few in camping and one in the Grand Champions row.
So if you want to go maybe talk to other people more personally, you'll probably be able to find somebody over there with that many airplanes.
Yeah, there's always somebody out there.
Okay. So yeah, I don't think that the T18, I don't think the reason we see fewer than back in those days is because of the airplanes. It's because our attention is divided amongst a lot more opportunities. And John Thorp kind of started that with, hey, let's get into metal airplanes. When, like you said, at the time when he designed this, the tradition was rag and tube type airplanes. So he kind of started that all aluminum that we see today in a lot of other models. Excellent. So thanks for asking that question, because it brought up the discussion about all the different models. Do we have any other questions here? Right on the top. Are you from New Zealand? I saw you giving us a high five on that. Excellent. Oh, the different wings, Sunderland wing versus, and you mentioned the leading edges were a little different.
Yeah, so I will get into this because our airplanes are both unique in that we have the Sunderland airfoil, but it's on a standard T18 wing. But the differences between the two airfoils is the original laminar flow airfoil had a somewhat unforgiving stall characteristic. It was flying or it wasn't. And that was the primary reason, or the reason why we went back and Lou Sunderland proposed an airfoil that has kind of a more rounded. It's kind of where the laminar flow. If you can picture a laminar flow airfoil, it's kind of a. Go look at a P51 and then take a P51 and kind of punch up about on the T18 maybe 2 inches after the leading edge and just kind of round that out a little bit. And what that effectively does is lower the stall speed about 10 miles an hour, and gives you an actual stall warning.
So that's not a cuff you add on, it's just a matter of making different ribs.
It's a different rib altogether.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. The original wing that we did go back, and a lot of people installed stall strips to give it a warning. So it's not like every T18 flying with the original wing is going to fall out of the sky when you stall.
Yeah, a little angle on the leading edge, because it trips the airflow early on.
It lets the horizontal stab know there's something going on.
Yeah, which lets you know, because
the second airplane that I rebuilt had the original airfoil, and it was quite abrupt stall. I mean, like Lee said, it's flying and it's not flying. And we put the stall strips, just a little 6-inch piece of aluminum angle, 1/2-inch slit, and you tape it on to find the ideal position. But once it's there, then it's just like a Warrior. As long as you're coordinated, it just kind of mushes over and goes on flying, which is what this one does without the stall strips.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for that question. Right here in the front.
Mine is.
They're both are using the Sunderland airfoil. Yeah. Yeah, you have the original airfoil.
Are you parked out there together? So then we could, yeah, stand there and go, okay. There's a retract version?
No, I mean,
Somebody's got it.
Yeah,
Somebody's got on floats.
To the best of my knowledge, I can think of 4 out there. There was a single seat tail dragger that was retracted, looked like a little P-51. All these were done in the 70s. There was a tri-gear retract. There was a 2-seat side-by-side retract. And there's one that's actually in Barnstormers right now that is powered by Franklin. And it has a very unique retract mechanism that takes actually I think the gear retracts forward into the aft end of the aft bay of the center section. But regardless, forget you even said anything about that, because it's you don't want to put retracts in a T18.
No.
The payoff is 0.
No, you can add extra weight to give no extra speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Got any more going? I didn't see anybody over here to my right. Any more questions? We're probably getting to the point that the sun's getting to y'all. So why don't we move this to, is it 11 o'clock? Is that when you're?
11:30.
11:30. So that means only 50 minutes from now, you can meet these same guys in the hangar right behind. It's got a big sign on the front. It says Home Builders Hangar. So they've got big TV screens, and we can do a different presentation that we did here. So thanks for coming out on behalf of EAA and the Home Builder Aircraft Council. We'd like to invite you to any other of our Home Builds in Review, which we have twice a day, this 10 o'clock, and then there's a 1 o'clock one. We've got a list on the boards out in front. This afternoon at 1 o'clock, we've got a gentleman who has flown his RV-8 from Germany, and he's on around the U.S. plus Alaska tour right now with his airplane. So we'll talk about what do you have to do to modify an airplane to get across the Atlantic, which he has now done 5 times. So he's got one more. He's got to get back home. So he's halfway through this journey. So anyway, thanks a lot. You guys have a great show, and hope to see you later on during the show. Appreciate it.